Kyo, can I come back to you for your final question while we're on the subject of ukiyo-e? Taking the masterful painting by Hokusai as a point of departure, can you briefly discuss how the university curriculum and a college environment enable different ways of framing a Japanese painting or artwork, and how you use that for teaching?
Yes, thank you. And maybe we can we advance the PowerPoint to the Hokusai? Yes, thank you. This is the Hokusai painting that Joan just mentioned in Betsy and Bob's collection. I think it's clearly one of the most dynamic Nikuhitsu works by Hokusai out there, a truly remarkable work. We all know that artworks they can be complex, that they tell many stories, that they need to be framed in different ways for different audiences, that they need to be understood from different perspectives. This is especially true in a university environment where there are so many different constituencies. You know, a place like Harvard has so many academic units, it's decentralized, there are people of different age groups from different backgrounds, it's vast, it's like a city-state. The curriculum tries to accommodate many of these different groups, and it has a stratigraphy. There are PhD programs in Japanese art alone. We have lots of PhD students, MA students. We have advanced undergraduates who are majors in art history, and we have freshmen who may have never taken a course in art history or even a real course in the humanities. I think presenting even a single work to such a multiplicity of different groups can be highly invigorating and pulls new perspectives out of someone like me who should be a specialist and who should be very familiar with many of these works. So this Hokusai work, Yorimasa shooting an arrow, aiming an arrow, is a good example. I think many of you may know the story that's being invoked here. This is a very famous subject from Japan's most famous military chronicle, the Tales of the Heike, in which a 12th century warrior, Yorimasa, is called to the imperial palace because one night Emperor Konoe falls ill. A black cloud is formed over the imperial palace, and in that cloud is a beast known as a nue that has come to kind of, you might say, haunt and trouble the imperial environment. And the nue is a remarkable creature. This is a beast that's one of the most fantastical in Japanese mythology. Has the head of a monkey, the body of a raccoon, the legs of a tiger, and the tail of a snake. And this creature is defeated by the great warrior Yorimasa, who launches an arrow into its body. It falls from the black cloud to the ground, where his retainer, a figure by the name of Ino Hayata, stabs it with a sword. It's a very famous episode that's been pictorialized in many different media in Japan, hand scrolls, hanging scrolls, illustrated books, single sheet prints. And you might say in the history of the illustration of this episode, the nue, this fantastical creature, you might say, it's a composite of many different animals. It's like the chimera of Japan, is the focus of attention. I'm showing you here a print by Kuniyoshi, kind of a rough contemporary of Hokusai, in which Yorimasa's retainer Ino Hayata is tackling this beast that has just fallen from the sky. And you can see how, again, how kind of grotesque and fantastical the nue beast is. But look what Hokusai's done. Hokusai has depicted the event without actually showing the antagonist, only intimating its presence by the dark sky, the kind of ominous black clouds, the rays of lightning, and Yorimasa's kind of line of sight, which he assumes is directed at this hovering creature. A really interesting work, but when this is taught to our students, I think several different approaches are required. When we teach our PhD students, they're pre-professional. They have to know what they're looking at. We emphasize starting with the object and working outwards. We talk about this seals and signatures. This is from Hokusai's 88th year in 1847, when he begins using a seal that says 100, indicating his own aspiration to live to 100. And remarkably, there are some 27 paintings that survive from his 88th year bearing this seal, which I think speaks eloquently to the remarkable productivity of Hokusai in his late years. But there's so much more to say, I think, that graduate students can focus on. You know, the composition is always interesting in Hokusai because we know he left manuals in which he talked about his own kind of geometry of composition, how he constructs pictures through circles and squares. And this is an image in which in the upper torso of Yorimasa, you could imagine a centrifuge of different lines and axes spinning off in different directions, indicated by the arrow, the lightning, his legs splayed out, constructing, I think, the logic of the, you might say, the kind of centrifugal logic of the composition. It even connects to his manga and his kind of studies of figures holding various implements going back to the 1810s. The details are remarkable. You know, I think for me, the copper red that's used on the flesh is important because it kind of connects this figure to some of Hokusai's more otherworldly figures in the Nikuhitsu corpus, such as Jungwei, the demon queller, even the thunder god at the freer. So it's kind of creating the supernatural image of this warrior. The clothing is unusual. Usually Yorimasa is a Heian courtier wearing Heian courtier's clothing, but here he is dressed, you might say, more as a kind of a kabuki stage hero, possibly an indication of the kind of commoner identification that Hokusai wants to convey, portray for this figure. The textures are remarkable. If you look at the sword pommel, it's the shark skin texture of the sword is very well, I think, conveyed in detail by Hokusai with these kinds of, you might say, dots of brush loads of gofun or white shell pigment that are used to convey a sense of the bumpiness of shark skin, which was actually used for Japanese sword handles in the Edo period. There might even be pigmentation on the backside, as the MFA Boston conservators have discovered in other Hokusai Nikuhitsu works. So we would emphasize really studying this object and really understanding where it's positioned in Hokusai's artistry and late Edo painting. But you know, when you show a work like this and when you teach a work like this to undergraduates, to students who are more novices to this type of material, I don't think it's enough to focus on Hokusai and to use a kind of a framework of the artist's life and artistry, because you know some students may not may need more background before they arrive at Hokusai. They might not be interested in individual artists. They might want to know more about the story, about the cultural milieu of the work, and so forth. And I think it's important to be broader. You know, this is a work that enables more universal questions about art and how art tells stories. You know, this is a remarkable episode being shown in a dramatic, remarkable way. And I think comparisons help here. And the comparison that might be, you know, one of the comparisons that might be more interesting in this case is to think about how early modern European theorists like Lessing talked about visual narrative. Many of you may know Lessing is a German, you know, philosopher and aesthetician, and he writes about this famous Roman sculpture, the Laocoon, and its relationship to painting. And he says, look, history painting, a history painter is masterful when they are able to choose the most pregnant moment in a historical event, the most pregnant moment. Historical events are long and messy. You know, these stories are time-based. Painting is static. So it's up to the history painter to be able to choose just the right scene that intimates what has just happened and is suggestive of what is to come, to fold the past and the present and the future tense of the story into one dramatic scene for maximum effect. That is where the mastery of the history painter lies. And this was really a foundation for history painting in the academy and in early modern Europe. But when you think about it, Hokusai is bringing a similar kind of acumen to this tale of Yorimasa here. You know, it's not just that he eliminates the nue from the scene, which is remarkable enough, but he's chosen a moment at which Yorimasa has drawn his arrow, filling his body with maximum tension, creating a kind of exertion that literally fills up the surface. He has eliminated the ground plane remarkably. So Yorimasa is floating in the air in the same kind of ethereal cosmic space as the nue. And you might say this is kind of a way, for me at least, of showcasing the focus of Yorimasa. Yorimasa is so intent upon his prey that the surroundings don't matter. They kind of fall away. Everything else has fallen away from the scene except for the concentration of the warrior that you see here. For those who know the story a little bit, you know, the bow is a family heirloom. It's inherited from his father, a great warrior, Yoshimitsu. And we know what's to come. This remarkable creature is going to fall from the sky, and there's going to be a battle that ensues on the ground. All of these are lessons of academic history painting that normally in Japanese history, we assume come into Japan during the Meiji period. During the Meiji period, Japan adopts the institutions and practices of the European Fine Arts Academy. The word bijutsu is invented, history painting is taught, Nihonga painters begin to paint along the lines of Lessing. But we see Hokusai doing this 40, 50 years earlier with a remarkable degree of acumen. And you know, this is a form of storytelling which transcends the local late Edo cultural concerns, but brings, I think, a work like this into conversation with patterns of masterful visual storytelling in other cultures, in other historical eras. So it's really an environment like the university where you're really trying to focus on different frameworks and different perspectives to bring out different aspects of a painting that I think enables the multiplicity of ways of appreciating even a single work like this one. So we've been very busy trying to attend to the other 300 plus paintings in a similar way during the Painting Edo exhibition. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful, Kyo. I'm just so jealous of your students, my goodness. And Bob and Betsy, I bet when you acquired this masterpiece, you didn't know quite how important a painting nor how many layers of interpretation and avenues for research it provided. Extraordinary. Thank you.
You can now understand something more about perhaps why we've decided to give the collection to Harvard.
Yeah.
Put them in the hands of teachers like Yukio for students to come. Wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay.